When my mom and dad retired, they got themselves a house in Greece, leaving me to care for the family home on my own. I didn't mind. It was better than trying to buy something on my own. Still, a 2-story home for a single man in his early 30s, that's a bit much. I lost my job during the pandemic, and with prices on the rise, I decided to start renting out parts of the space I wasn't using. There was enough room upstairs in the house for at least a couple of college students, and a spacious basement for another. Just this large one-room basement that basically covered the entire underside of the building, supported by these thick concrete beams. It wasn't the kind of place I'd usually consider renting out, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to offer, as long as I was honest about the state of things. I spent a good month just preparing the spaces, clearing out the upstairs and moving things from the basement to a long-term storage facility. At first, it looked like we had some water damage to deal with, but it turned out to be a false alarm. All in all, it was shaping up to be a pretty painless transition, and the rent would keep me afloat until I could get a proper job. I put out an ad on a couple of socials. One for the upstairs space, large enough to support at least a couple of people, and then the basement. I wasn't really sure about the basement, but I included a few pictures and hoped for the best. The price was cheap, too. Cheaper than it should be, I guess. I got a few applications for the upstairs space, but most of them were either really short-term or started arguing about the price. One guy just showed up and tried to walk straight in without calling first. It was a weird time. I didn't get any calls about the basement, though, so I figured I just screwed that up. It was early October when I had a knock at the door. The classic ... kind of knock. I hurried to open, still browsing job openings on my phone and chewing on a piece of cold pizza from the prior night. It's hard to explain how surprised I was to see what I saw. Most other applicants had been either young guys or college girls. What was now standing in front of me was a family of 4. A mother and a father, both in their mid-40s, and 2 young boys ranging from 10 to 14 years old. The mom had this autumn-colored cotton dress with a little ribbon, and the dad had this fancy black overcoat, a white shirt with a red tie. Both kids were dressed up in identical blue shirts. At first, I thought they were there to try to convert me to something. I could easily imagine them with a set of Bibles. Instead, the dad stepped forward, offering me a handshake. I accepted. "Hi there," he said with a warm smile. "We're the Walters. We're here about the ad." "Oh, hello," I answered. "It might get a bit crowded, but you're free to have a look. Sorry about the, I vaguely gestured to my unprepared state, but the dad just shook his head. "Not at all. Hope we are not imposing." I invited them inside, and they went right past the stairs. I figured they just missed it. "Excuse me," I said. "It's right up here." "Oh, we know," smiled the mom. "We are here about the basement." So there's this long wooden staircase that spirals into the basement. It's one of the main reasons I don't like going down there or furnishing the place. That spiral makes it almost impossible to bring down any proper furniture. It's infuriating. But all 4 members of this picture-perfect family stepped down, all composed. They were courteous and respectful, with just the polite amount of excitement. But I got the sense there was something just off about them. The dad brought out some measuring tape and started checking the walls. He asked me about the lack of windows, the air quality, their ability to bring down some furniture, and put up some light fixtures. I agreed to all of it. I still couldn't believe they were actually considering it. This was clearly not a space meant for a family of 4, and they gave the impression that they were pretty well off. There was no reason for them to rent a space like this. Still, as they finished their inquiries, the mother approached me. "Would you mind stepping upstairs and just walking around a bit?" she asked. "We'd like to see how much sound carries through." A strange way to ask for soundproofing, but I did as she asked. I got up the stairs, put on my heaviest boots, and just wandered around for a bit. After a couple of minutes, I turned the corner only to see all 4 of them standing in the hallway, picture perfect as always, all with a big smile on each of their faces. "We are very pleased," the mother said. "We'll take it." They signed a 6-month rent agreement, and I got to know them a little better over the next few weeks as they sporadically dropped by. There was Lila, the mother, Anders, the father, and the kids were Aiden, 12, and Alvin, 13. Apparently, they were in between housing and wanted something small and cheap in the interim. Despite all of that, I couldn't shake the feeling that a basement was a strange choice for them. Still, I needed the money, and they were eager to get it done. They even offered to pay a little extra, since they were bringing in more people than I'd anticipated. About a week later, they showed up for the official move-in. Lila and Anders insisted on bringing in everything themselves, and that I shouldn't be bothered with any heavy lifting. Apparently, just letting them stay there was favor enough. They brought in about a dozen pieces of furniture covered in blue tarp in various sizes, along with a dozen or so large cardboard boxes, none of them marked. They put down several hand-woven carpets, the kind you'd see in a large mansion. Lila was a stay-at-home mom, while Anders worked as some kind of security manager for a nearby airport. He worked odd hours, anything from 12-hour shifts to all-nighters, and everything in between. He was also on call for most hours of the day, and sometimes had to leave with short notice. It was strange, though. One might think a person like that would need space with good cell coverage. But that basement barely had a single bar. There was Wi-Fi, but it was spotty at best. For some reason, none of this seemed to bother them. That first week living with the Walters was not a problem. Most of the time, I forgot they were even there. I only saw them leave the basement a handful of times, and they didn't make any noise. At most, I could hear them stomping up or down that creaky old staircase a couple of times, but that was mostly Anders heading to work. In fact, I never saw Aiden and Alvin leave for school. I figured they were being homeschooled, further pushing the idea that this family might have some sort of religious background. Still, they were hardly an issue. I was still working hard on finding someone to rent the upstairs, but I was having no luck. I'd considered lowering the price, but after the Walters moved in, money was becoming less of an issue. Anders even suggested that I apply for a job at the airport. He knew one of the HR people looking for hires in various departments. Having been jobless for 5 months, I was willing to try pretty much anything. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't telling me the whole story. I kept coming back to one thought. What the hell were they even doing down there? Once, I decided to get a better look at what they'd done with the place. At that point, I hadn't even seen how they'd decorated it. It was in the middle of the afternoon, and I had no idea whether they were even down there or not. Their car was gone from the driveway. I knocked a couple of times, and when there was no response, I used my key to get down. As I turned the corner, it was deathly quiet and completely dark. I turned on the lights. They all slept in these basic single beds, all spaced out along the easternmost wall. They had a small love-seat couch, along with a couple of basic plastic chairs facing a thick old TV placed against the wall. There was an empty bookshelf and a couple of scattered carpets along the floor. I could see a few open boxes. There was a bathroom next to the staircase, but it looked unused. No toothbrushes or anything. It took me a few moments to realize that I wasn't alone. The entire family was standing in a line along the southernmost wall, furthest away from the staircase. They were standing in order of size from tallest to smallest, remaining perfectly still, just looking at me. It wasn't until they noticed me seeing them that they reacted. They all looked up at me, putting on a friendly smile. "Can we help you?" asked Lila. "I hope we didn't make too much noise," continued Anders. The kids just nodded in unison. I took a good look at them, but I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. I had no explanation for their behavior. "Sorry, I'm just going to check the water pressure." I lied. I tried knocking. "That's all right," smiled Anders. "Go right ahead." Walking back up the stairs, a thought hit me. If they were all down there, why was their car gone? Who'd taken it? I had a number of strange interactions with them over the next couple of weeks. For example, I once found Aiden, the younger of the two brothers, standing in the kitchen. He wasn't doing anything in particular, just standing there, staring at the spice rack. When I asked him about it, he just said he wasn't doing anything. After a while, he turned on his heel and ran back downstairs. I didn't see it, but I heard his little feet thump all the way down the staircase. Another time, I saw Lila standing in the open doorway leading to the basement. She was just standing there, hand on the doorknob, looking right at me. I said, "Hello," and she said it right back, but she wouldn't let me out of her sight. When I finally passed from her view, I could hear her running back down the stairs. Not just hurrying, running. Another time, I saw Anders in the car out on the driveway. I saw him from the upstairs window, just sitting there, hands on the steering wheel, for a good 15 minutes. No radio or nothing, just him alone in his car. But the strangest interaction came one night when I was going to the kitchen to get a Coke. I spotted Lila standing in the kitchen, fridge wide open. I could see her silhouette illuminated by the fridge bulb. Her long black hair wet from a fresh shower, standing in a hastily tied bathrobe, her feet bare. At first, I didn't see anything strange. She was just standing there. She wasn't getting anything. It was more like she was bathing in the light. I thought about calling out to her, but something about her demeanor made me want to sneak back into my bedroom. Then I saw it. There was something wrong with her ear. Her left ear was about 3 inches higher up than her right one, without her bending her neck. Her scalp seemed lightly tilted, and there was something about the way she moved her fingers that didn't look natural. They pointed in different directions, like her hand was ever so slightly fractured. I just stayed there for a while, looking at her from a distance, watching her shoulders rise and fall as she took deep breaths, inhaling the cold. When she turned my way, I only saw her for a moment, her torso moving first and her legs following, like a stilted claymation puppet. I managed to slip around the corner and heard her rush back towards the basement, her feet tapping against the hallway carpet in an uneven rhythm. When she got to the door, she stopped. I was leaning against the wall, listening from the other room. I heard her step around for a bit. Then there was a snap, a popping limb, something finding its way back into a socket. Her steps resumed a natural pattern as she hurried downstairs. I just stayed there for a while, trying to keep calm. For all intents and purposes, I might have just been seeing her in a weird light. It was dark, and I was sleepy. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unnatural about her, that I'd seen something that I wasn't supposed to see. From that day forward, I got more suspicious. I didn't go into the hallway at night, and I did my best to avoid the basement door altogether. I tried my best to just put them out of my head. I went back to focusing on getting a job, and a second tenant for the upstairs space, both of which proved to be a challenge, but I was making progress. The TSA was hiring, for example. Not the most glamorous job, but it'd be solid work. There was a couple of college students who came by to check the upstairs floor. A young couple who needed a place to stay while they finished up their master's degree. They seemed like solid people, and we got along just fine. They knew the place wasn't the most glamorous, but it was a neat short-term solution while they finished up the upcoming semester. The only problem was the Walters family, who I had yet to introduce them to. I remember knocking on the basement door, having the young couple standing behind me expectantly. Albin, the youngest of the brothers, chimed in with a cheerful, "Come in." As we stepped downstairs, the family of 4 was standing in a picture-perfect 2x2 formation. Mom and Dad in the back, 2 kids in the front, all dressed in their Sunday best, with a freshly printed smile across each of their faces. The whole scene was so absurd, like some kind of misplaced commercial from the 1950s. "Hello," giggled Lila. "Aren't they the most handsome couple, Anders?" "They sure are, Lila. What do you think, kids?" And in unison, without skipping a beat, the kids answered, "They sure are handsome." For the next 20 seconds or so, this uncomfortable silence grew between us. The Walters just stood there, smiling at us. waiting for some kind of response. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't help but feel that I was missing something obvious. Was Lila's eye color a bit different? Was Albin's face a bit lopsided? Was Anders missing a finger? Or did he just stand in a weird angle? Maybe they'd been strange all along. Maybe it was only now that I was seeing it. When we finally parted ways, I followed the young couple outside, their faces ashen. One of them just stuttered, but the other managed to form a few words. "We are not ones to judge," she said, "but those people give me the creeps. You won't be seeing much of them. Yeah, see, that's my point. Who does that? What kind of family willingly lives in a basement? It's only a temporary measure, I assure you they—" By then, the other chimed in. "What's with the boxes?" he asked. "What's in them?" "Personal keepsakes, clothes, that kind of stuff." "No, I mean, the box that moved. The blue one." The discussion died down and they said their goodbyes. I got the feeling that they wouldn't be returning anytime soon. Still, their words lingered in the back of my head. A box that moved. Really? How did I miss that? After countless sleepless nights, I decided to finally get some answers. I had to take a little risk and figure this out, once and for all. So one day I slipped a note under the door, informing them that we needed to clear out the basement for one afternoon while a plumber did some repairs. I looked up a few plumbing things on Wikipedia and referenced a real company, making it look all official and stuff. Later that day, Lila and Anders dropped by, holding hands, telling me that they'd be sure to be out for the day. "Maybe we'll go to the zoo," smiled Anders. "Don't you have work?" I asked. "It comes and goes," he laughed. "We are very fortunate." "Very fortunate," agreed Lila. "So very fortunate." At the designated time, the family was out of the building. They went for a drive in Anders' car, promising to return shortly. I told them it wouldn't take the plumber more than an hour. They seemed a little suspicious when they hadn't seen the actual plumber show up yet. And they let that suspicion hang in the air. Finally, I just straight up lied, giving them a fake name and asking whether they wanted me to call him. Lila didn't call my bluff, luckily, but as they pulled out of the driveway, I could tell I was sweating. I didn't even know what I feared, but my mind kept returning to that night when I'd seen her standing in the light of the fridge. I had no idea what they were hiding, or what they might do if I found out about it, but there was a part of me that just wanted to get into my car and drive, and another part of me that kept telling me I was being silly. When they finally drove away, I wasted no time. I hurried downstairs, turned on the light, and started to go through their stuff. It was an invasion of privacy, probably illegal, but I wanted to sleep soundly again. I had to have an idea of why they were being so god-mad weird. There were a lot of oddities about their space. For example, all their beds were perfectly made, like no one had slept in them. Most of the couches and surfaces were covered in dust. I could tell the TV hadn't been on in a long time. It wasn't even plugged in. There were no phones or phone chargers, no laptops or desktop computers, just a bunch of boxes and underutilized furniture. I did find a Polaroid camera though, at least 30 years old. I started checking their boxes, just clothes it seemed. All variations of what I'd already seen, identical sets of shirts, pants, dresses, and shoes. At least 4 boxes worth. One box was just full of accessories, like earrings, necklaces, glasses, hairspray, and fake nails. Another was full of decorations and knickknacks, porcelain dogs, family photos, dried sunflowers and roses, both with strange colors and fancy vases. I took my time, carefully placing everything back the way I found it. It was odd, but nothing incriminating or downright unnatural. Still, I remember what that couple had said about a box that moved. I couldn't see anything like it. That is, until I turned to leave. Right by the side of the stairs, resting next to the pristine bathroom, was a large blue styrofoam cooler. It was the kind of thing that kind of blended into the background, like it had always been there. Still, I could clearly remember not owning one of those things. It looked old and torn, like it had been around for years. And maybe I was imagining things, but it looked like it was moving, pulsing, pressing against the surface, making little plastic squeals. There was a sound coming from it, like a low guttural growl pushed through a thin pipe, a sharp rhythmic noise. It made the cooler rattle and shake ever so slightly. I froze, hoping it would quiet down. I held my breath and waited for it to settle. I slowly stepped back up the stairs. As I rounded the corner and lost sight of the cooler, I heard the styrofoam cover pop off, and the sound became clearer, a loud growl, shifting in pitch from high to low, like a singer doing some kind of sick vocal warm-up, trying to find the right pitch. Then, something hit the floor with a painful yelp. I stopped dead in my tracks, trying to identify the sound. It was like a cross between a dog and some kind of fox, a sharp, screeching tone. Then, it scrambled to its feet. I could hear claws and paws scratch the floor, and something was coming my way, fast. There was something primal in me that told me to run. I hurried up the stairs, only looking back for a short glimpse as I shut the door behind me. I only saw it for a moment, something black with a single eye reflecting back at me. Its skin tight and misplaced across the skull, teeth pointing out in all directions in seemingly random sizes, black drool dripping off of an elongated tongue. A thing wearing the cheap suit of a black dog. As I slammed the door shut, I could hear a car pull up in the driveway. It had been less than 30 minutes. Maybe they had planned to catch me in the act. I heard them come in and head straight for the basement. Meanwhile, I was in the other room, throwing together a small bag with a change of clothes and a toothbrush. The moment I heard the basement door shut, I headed for my car. As soon as I got in the car, I saw them step out of the house. They all stood there in the driveway, just looking at me. And right next to them was a beautiful black Labrador, happily wagging its tail. I didn't say a word, I just drove. I had to get some space between us and figure out what the hell I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the police, but there was no way to explain what I had seen. What could they even do? Kick them out for having a dog? There was even a clause in the rental agreement that allowed them a pet. I had nothing to go on. I decided to spend that night at a motel just outside of town. I needed time to think and sleep without having the threat of something strange living under my feet. I couldn't get that image out of my head. That black thing in a dog suit, like something trying to remember what a dog looked and sounded like in real time. I checked in at the motel and got a room on the first floor. I crawled into bed, put the TV on, and surfed a bit on my phone. I could feel myself relax for the first time in weeks, but every time I thought about that house and that family, I could feel my pulse stagger. I had no idea what to do or who to call, which is what led me to this site in the first place. A lot of you seem to have seen strange things. I figured I'd post here eventually, but it took me quite some time to build up the courage, mostly because of what happened later that night. I remember a tap on the door. I must have dozed off. I hadn't turned the TV off or brushed my teeth. I just woke up with this sour feeling in my stomach that something was terribly wrong. I had closed the curtains so I wouldn't see who it was. I thought about hiding under the bed or locking myself in the bathroom. My thoughts raced, but I tried to temper them with rational what-ifs. Maybe it was just housekeeping, or a concerned manager. Then the knock came again, this time with a voice. "Mister?" said Alvin Walters. "Mom wants to talk to you." I didn't answer. For a few seconds, I carefully stepped out of bed, trying my best not to make any noise. "Mom wants to talk to you," he repeated. "It's urgent." There was no way they didn't know I was in there. They knew, and they wanted something. And whatever it was, I didn't want to find out. I sneaked to the back of the room as the doorknob started to rattle. I could hear Alvin again. This time, his voice shrunk to threatening lows, like the dark growl of an adult or elderly man.
"Mom wants to talk to you."
I pulled open the curtains to a window facing the back of the building. I figured I could climb out of the window, but as soon as those curtains opened, my heart skipped a beat. Right there was Anders, the father himself, just inches from the window, standing straight with his neatly tucked shirt illuminated by the sharp light of the single TV screen, an ever-courteous smile cemented on his face. He tapped the window. "Would you mind opening up?" he asked. "It won't take long." Again, I looked a little closer, and again I could see little details that were just off. A slight droop of the lip that hadn't been there the day before, one eye pulled lower than the other, his hairline further forward than usual, like he'd rushed himself to look like a person. Another knock at the door. Another knock at the window. Voices from the front and the back. Maybe even the room next door. Little voices. Big voices. Broken voices.
We just want to clear some things up. Mom wants to talk. It's not what you think.
I had to make a break for it, but for that I needed to decide where to go. So I pulled the front curtains aside to see how many of them were waiting up front. All 5 of them were standing out front. Mom, Dad, kids, and dog. I looked back as if trying to convince myself I was sane. There were 2 dads, and none of them looked right. Further down the street, in their car, I spotted 2 more kids identical to Aiden and Alvin, both with little quirks, like they weren't fully formed yet. A loose jaw, a strange eye, one of them had a wide bald spot. Stepping out of the motel manager's office, I saw another Lila, this one with a deflated arm and a paralyzed face. I was surrounded. I held up my phone like a weapon. "I'm calling the police," I yelled. "Get the f*** away from me." "That'd be inconvenient," said Anders.
"And you'd be dead."
Added Aiden.
"Long dead,"
chuckled Alvin, his voice not tuned right. The doorknob rattled again, more forceful this time. I could feel my pulse rising, my breath growing short. I looked back and forth, seeing the Anders at the back window trying to figure out the lock. Only now did I see that one of his fingers was nothing but bone. "How about a trade?" suggested Lila. "Something for everyone." "What the f*** are you talking about?" "Go inside that bathroom of yours, grab a piece of tissue and chew on it, then drop it out of the window." What? I couldn't understand what I was hearing. It's like the words were there, but didn't make any sense to me. "We are going to need a new suit," said Lila. "You will do." "You are not wearing me." "Oh, we'll leave you alone, and you'll leave us alone. Because if you don't, people that look like you are going to start doing some terrible things, aren't they, Anders?" "Oh, they are, Lila," said Anders. "Terrible, terrible things. So that way, we can walk away. You'll never see us again, and we'll leave you be." I tried to wrap my head around it. They were going to make a suit out of me, like they'd done with that dog and with that family. There would be someone looking like me, walking around out there. Something vile. But what choice did I have? I stepped into the bathroom and chewed up a piece of tissue. I spat it out and moved to the window. The family stepped back. I clicked the window open and flung the piece of tissue out with a flick of the finger. Lila picked it up and met my eyes with an unblinking gaze. With one clench of the fist, she grabbed the top of her head and pulled. Her entire face lurched backwards, her lower lip reaching all the way to her eyebrows. Underneath was just this black sludge, covering what looked like a deformed skull. She was like a walking oil slick, completely midnight black and slick as water. She pushed the piece of tissue inside herself before pulling her face back down. It took her a few seconds to realign, but she just couldn't get it to look right. She coughed a little. She waited. She nodded, and when she looked back at me, she did so with my own eyes, speaking with my own tongue. "Thank you," I heard myself say. "I think this will work out for all of us, don't you?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't think. I just closed the curtains and scrambled backwards. I heard a car pull around. I heard rustling in the bushes out back, and from afar I could hear my own voice a final time. "We'll be gone by morning," it said, "but we are never far away." A car drove off, leaving me in a stunned silence, my mouth dry from hyperventilating. The next morning, they were gone. The basement was empty, and they even left a thank you note. Attached to it was a Polaroid picture of a happy family. A mom, a dad, 2 kids, and a funny uncle. One that looked exactly like me. I have been contemplating on whether to share this for some time, knowing what they could do, but I believe they are not technically proficient enough to find this, and I've omitted a lot of details. I just need to know if anyone has met something similar. And if so, how you managed to put it behind you. Are they still out there? Or are they watching me? How many suits do they have? I wanted to just put this behind me and pretend it never happened, but it's getting harder and harder. Every now and then, I see someone that looks vaguely like them. An Anders with a different haircut, a Lila that's slightly younger, school photos with an Aiden or Alvin, but a different hair color. And a few weeks ago, I got a call from a friend mentioning how they'd seen me in the local newspaper. Only thing is, I've never been in it. I've considered moving somewhere far, far away, but first I just need to get this out. I need someone to believe me. The real me, and not the me you might see in the papers. With the Halloween season approaching, I decided to get this warning out to everyone I could reach. If you ever come across a haunted house that shouldn't be there, don't go inside. This haunted house pops up between two other houses you already know. It won't be squeezed in like someone built a new house in the middle of the two plots, but rather, it'll fit in like the whole place was designed that way. It'll be as if the street had always been a few 100 feet longer than you remember. If such a house appears out of nowhere, do not approach it. Do not knock on the door, and whatever you do not cross the threshold. Once you do, your fate is sealed. Unfortunately, no one gave me this warning when I was a kid. Maybe it was new, or perhaps there just weren't many survivors back then. Whatever the case, no one warned me. So when I went up, knocked on the door, and shouted, "Trick or treat," I did not listen to the small doubt in the back of my mind that told me to run away. Now, every year, I have to go back to living that nightmare. After all, I'm on the expected guest list now, and if you don't show up to the haunted house on Halloween night, the house comes looking for you. And from what I've heard, it's much, much worse if you force its hand. The years have somewhat blurred together, but I still remember the first time all too well. I sometimes curse myself for not listening to my doubts when I walked up to that place, but to be fair, as well decked out as this house was, any kid would expect to get a bag full of loot. The owner clearly went all out. There were realistic tombstones out front of open graves with names like Timmy and John dated for that very day. Some people in spooky costumes carried body bags out to fill some of the graves as I walked up. I even remember wondering how often they pulled the bodies back out to repeat the show for trick-or-treaters like me. When you knock on the door, a man I named the ringleader in my head opens up the door and invites you inside. Any sane person would probably take one look at the guy, turn around, and walk away. He looks like someone stapled skin directly onto his skeleton, with no thought of where musculature or fat should exist. His eyes look like they're so loose in his sockets that if he leaned too far forward, they just fall out and roll around on the ground. His teeth were yellowed and broken enough to give any dentist nightmares for weeks to come, and he wore a baggy, faded suit, complete with long tails and a top hat. On your first visit, the ringleader will ask you the same question you've probably heard 1,000 times before.
And what are you supposed to be?
This is actually one of the few breaks the house gives you. You see, you get one benefit based on what you are. For example, if you are, say, a pirate or a ninja, that cheap plastic sword you came in with will become real. A dragon might get actual claws and scales, and so on. At the time, you might think this is cool, but it's really just a chance for the house to make the game more sporting. And if you manage to survive, you'll be that same thing every time you return until you finally lose the game. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. What were you dressed up as when you showed up? Honestly, I don't remember. That may seem like it doesn't make sense, but let me explain. You see, while the other kids around me were shouting things like, "I'm a soldier," or "I'm a princess," I just stood there, frozen in fear. The part of my brain that should have kept me from crossing that threshold finally kicked in, and I could tell that this man, no, this monster, was looking at all of us as though we were nothing more than slabs of meat. The funny thing is, everyone always talks about the fight or flight response, but many people fail to realize that there's a third option that your brain can pick to override your thought process, and that's to freeze. So when the monster, literally wearing human skin, turned to me and asked,
"And what are you supposed to be?"
I froze. After a few seconds, he grinned and answered for me.
"I see we have a coward."
At the time, my face burned in shame as the other kids in the room laughed at my new title. But that was the luckiest thing that could have ever happened to me. You see, over the years, I see fewer and fewer familiar faces coming out of the house when I show up for my run. In fact, I've only seen one other person I know in the last 5 years, but we'll get back to him in a bit. Nowadays, when I show up, the ringleader checks me off on his list and glowers when he says my little,
"The coward."
and I can't help but grin smugly at him. It's probably not wise to provoke the house that way, but in all these years, the ringleader has been unable to win our little life and death game, and it's all thanks to the title he gave me. Like many haunted places, this house has some rules. Thankfully, it's not a long and complicated list designed to trip you up through sheer complexity. There are only 3 simple things you need to know. The first rule is the Wolfman is in the basement. This is important because despite how innocuous he sounds, the Wolfman is quite possibly the most dangerous obstacle the house has. He's immortal, insanely fast, and impossibly strong. Once he gets your scent, you just have to hope you're close enough to the basement stairs to climb them before he catches you. And if you are not fast enough, you are food. Most of my closest calls came from encounters with the Wolfman. The second rule is, to escape the house, you must first find the heart of the house. The heart is in a different location every year, and no one will tell you where. You just have to find it, touch it, and get out. This is where being the coward comes in handy. My benefit is I get hunches. Those hunches might be about a new monster or a room you encounter. Best of all, they might tell me where the heart is located. The problem is, it is just a hunch, and it's far too easy to let my hopes or fears get in the way of a hunch. But over the years, I've learned to trust my gut. It's a lot smarter than I am. Oh, and the third rule? It's even more straightforward than the other 2. If Mr. Hyde joins the hunt, everyone dies. That's it. You just have to hope and pray that Mr. Hyde decides to sit out another year. You can do a few things to mitigate that risk, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The rest of my first year was pretty forgetful, relatively speaking. There were some ghosts and zombies to run from, and the heart was in the kitchen. I don't even remember seeing any kids dying that time, but I do remember that while all the other kids were laughing and joking while running through the house, I noticed that those zombies looked just a little too real. And the blood and gore some of them had glistening on their lips looked like it might have come from those body bags out front. Maybe the house was taking pity on us because we were just kids, or perhaps it wanted to let our fears simmer a little more before it all went out. Over the following years, I saw some of those kids again, but eventually, all of their grins turned grim, and the laughter disappeared. That's more or less what it was like for a few years. I ran through the house, got to the heart, and ran out. Once you reach the threshold and start leaving the yard, there's just one last obstacle. There, sitting on a bench you never see when you're approaching the house, is a being of pure malevolence. He looks like an oversized man with arms that are far too long of his body, and always has a grin that would be goofy if it weren't so evil. This is Mr. Hyde. You must look and acknowledge him, usually with a head tilt, then look away and pray he decided your fear is enough that year. One time, I stared just a little too long, and he stood up and followed me to the yard's edge. The whole time, I could feel his hot breath on the back of my neck, and I knew that if I so much as picked up the pace or turned around, I was dead. Another year, I saw him sitting there with a corpse in his lap. He'd shoved his hand through the back of its skull and was using it like a puppet to make crude jokes and laugh at all the victims walking by. By then, I knew it wasn't just a prop, and I wondered what that poor soul had done to attract Mr. Hyde's attention. Maybe nothing. Perhaps it was just an unlucky day for the poor guy. I try not to think about Mr. Hyde too much. I get the feeling he knows when you are thinking about him, and I'd prefer not to attract too much of his attention. When I was 14, I made the biggest mistake of my life. My mom told me to take my little brother, 9 at the time, out trick-or-treating. No matter how much I protested or told her I had something important to do, she wouldn't relent. So eventually, I gave up and took him. Sure enough, the house showed up partway through our little adventure. I remember looking at my brother in the eyes and telling him, "Stay out here. I have to take care of something, and you don't want any part of it, okay?" Of course, he nodded. When I got inside, the ringleader started checking us off the guest list. After I introduced myself as the coward, I still hated the title at the time, I heard an all too familiar voice say, "I'm a wizard." Looking down in horror, I could see my kid brother standing there, grinning like the idiot he was. I tried protesting. No, no, no. He's not supposed to be in here. Let him out right now." But the ringleader grinned and answered,
All are welcome in the haunted house, and the only way out is forward.
He motioned us through. The first bit of our run was pretty standard. There were a few zombies that were easily dodged, and this time the heart was on the second floor. While climbing the stairs, giant spiders jumped down and grabbed people, then dragged them up into the rafters as they kicked and screamed. One came for my kid brother, but with a swift kick it fell to the floor below. As the nightmare on 8 legs started scuttling back up the stairs, we ran up and closed ourselves into the first room available. But of course, there's no such thing as a safe room in a haunted house like this, and sure enough, as we turned around away from the door, we came face to midriff with a living shadow. It stood tall enough that it had to hunch over in a room more than big enough to house even the tallest NBA players comfortably. I call it a living shadow because its skin seemed to absorb light, creating a void wherever it was. I remember it reaching out and grabbing me, and my skin burning from the extreme cold of its touch. But then, my brother decided to take advantage of his gift, and I kid you not, he held out his hand like a finger gun and shouted, "Bang!" To this day, I have no idea how it worked or how he knew it would work, but the thing screamed and dropped me, clutching its arm like it had been shot. We kicked out the door, which thankfully slammed into the spider that had been chasing us, stunning it as we ran to the end of the hall, wherein lay the master bedroom and the heart of the house. The heart is a very literal heart, by the way, about the size of a large dog, usually visible through a crack in the wall. I've seen people stab it, shoot it, burn it, and do just about anything else you could think of. Yes, my brother had used his finger guns on it. And while the damage sometimes looks impressive, it always comes back the next year as if nothing happened. In this case, we merely tagged it, ran back into the hallway, vaulted the banister rather than trying the stairs again, and ran back out the entrance, home free. Of course, now my brother has to run the haunted house every year. We make a point to go together, as between my coward hints and his magic finger gun, we seem to have a pretty strong advantage against whatever the house wants to throw at us. But that's not to say we don't have our close calls. 2 years ago, the heart was in the basement, and you remember what's in the basement, don't you? For most veterans, the basement is the last place you look, only after you've cleared the rest of the house. But when my gut says to go downstairs, that's where we go. It went pretty much like every trip downstairs goes. The place is filled with junk piled taller than me and smelled of cement, exposed carpentry, and mildew that many Midwest basements seem to have. The layout also changes every year, so you are stuck kind of shuffling about, hoping you stumble into the right room without being caught, listening for screams and trying to go the other way. This time, we got to the heart without incident, which was good, but the Wolfman started chasing us on our way out. As I broke into a run, I could hear the Wolfman right behind me, but I figured I had just enough time to reach the stairs, and then I tripped. Falling in the basement is about as surefire a death sentence as you can get in the house, and sure enough, in half a moment, the Wolfman was on me. I still have the scars from where he cut my arm up as I protected my face and throat. My only consolation then was at least my brother got away. However, not a moment later, the Wolfman and I looked up in time to see my brother, with both hands making his classic finger guns, as he pointed right at the Wolfman's left eye and shouted, "Bang!" Let me tell you, seeing a full-grown man making finger guns and yelling "bang" with a straight face is quite the spectacle, but you gotta do whatever you can to survive in that place. Now, the Wolfman might be immortal, but that apparently doesn't mean he can't feel pain, because he sat up and screamed while holding his eye. I could see bits of his skull, while blood and other substances leaked between his fingers. I didn't need an engraved invitation. I placed my feet square in the middle of his chest and kicked for everything I was worth. As the Wolfman flew back, I rolled over and scrambled up the stairs on all fours, like a kid who just turned out the light. We both took a moment at the top of the basement stairs to laugh nervously, before hearing an impossibly loud and engaged howl coming from the basement. We decided not to push our luck any longer and got the hell out of Dodge, winking at the ringleader and nodding more respectfully to Mr. Hyde as we passed. That brings us to last year, when at least one of the rules got broken for the first time. My brother and I met up as usual. I smirked at the ringleader as he scowled at my title. We got past the starting zombies quickly enough. Seriously, who dies to those things? But then, I got the feeling the heart was out back, in the garden. I was just relieved it wasn't in the basement, as I didn't want to see the Wolfman so soon after our last encounter. There was a glass passageway between the house and the garden, and this time it was filled with paper cranes floating gently on unseen currents of air, many of which seemed to have tiny rubies glistening on their wings. Of course, nothing in this house is ever innocent, and as we started walking carefully through the passage, the cranes began swooping, and every time they passed by, their wings glided across the skin, giving a nasty paper cut. That's when I noticed several bodies on the ground with pools of blood around them. Apparently death by 1,000 cuts. Not having time to think, I raised my arms, covering my eyes, and charged forward. By the time I reached the end, I had probably somewhere between 20 and 30 paper cuts, all of which stung worse than a bee sting. But remembering the bodies in the room, it could have been much worse. What awaited us in the garden was a solitary figure. There, standing watch as if he'd been plucked right out of an old Japanese movie, was an honest-to-God, heavily armored samurai. His face was obscured by a mask, but I'm reasonably sure that if I pulled down the mask, the armor would have been hollow. However, looking at the bodies beside the samurai that had obviously been cut in two, I decided not to indulge my curiosity. Judging by the placement of the bodies, some had tried to fight, and others had tried to run. My brother got ready to fight, and immediately the warrior's hand flew to his sword, but I placed a hand on my brother's shoulder and pulled him back, stepping forward to face the samurai myself. As the samurai slowly drew his blade, rather than fight or flee, I got down on my knees and bowed, deciding to acknowledge that there was little else we could do. "O great warrior, we beseech you, be merciful and let us pass." Yeah, it was a little flowery, I admit, but hey, when asking a ghost samurai to spare your life, sometimes you have to go all out. When, after a moment, he didn't cut me down, which I'm at least 45% sure was due to my actions and words, I motioned my brother to do the same. After a few more moments, the samurai sheathed his sword and returned to his vigil, and we got off our knees and passed by, approaching to the heart of the house. This time, the heart was standing in a glass cylinder coming out of a rose bush. Carefully opening the cylinder, we touched the heart, which was as warm and slimy as ever, before turning to leave. However, just as we did so, there, coming out of the glass passageway, came the one thing I least wanted to see that moment: the Wolfman. He looked a little different than I had remembered. Half his face was rotted away, leaving his skull exposed. He had maggots wriggling and writhing in the empty socket that had once housed his eye. His teeth and claws were covered in the blood of whoever had been unfortunate enough to get between him and his goal. and judging by the glare of his sole functional eye, we were that goal. He stepped forward, crouching to begin his chase. Without the basement stairs nearby, I knew we didn't stand a chance of outrunning him. Unsure of what to do, I froze while my mind ran through what few options we had again and again. However, once again, my cowardice saved the day. As the wolfman charged forward, he was intercepted by the samurai. The sideways slash should have cut him in half, but the wolfman simply twisted and turned, bending his spine in a way that should have been impossible, before stopping to glare at his new obstacle. However, the samurai did not hesitate and stepped forward again, this time performing an upward slash even faster than his first strike. Realizing he wouldn't get past this annoyance without addressing it, the wolfman launched himself forward, latching onto his opponent. The two fell and grappled in the dirt, and we took the opportunity to run past. When the wolfman reached out to us, the samurai took his smaller blade and plunged it into the wolfman's side, and their combat resumed. Running through the passageway, all the paper cranes were mangled and torn, lying on the ground, no longer a threat. Once inside, we could see the zombies in the house, all torn to pieces. Running into the entranceway, the ringleader was just plain missing. Then we were outside and free. We took a moment to catch our breath, but when I looked up to acknowledge Mr. Hyde, I realized he was also missing from his usual seat. Then, the screaming started in the house behind us. Some screams always echoed out of the house, but not like this. The screams were tortured and often inhuman. They were also interposed with bouts of maniac laughter. Looking at each other, my brother and I nodded and decided to run. We could wait a year to find out what was happening behind us. And that brings us to this year. I don't know what awaits me at the haunted house this time. Maybe it won't even show up. But somehow, I doubt I'll be that lucky. I just found this subreddit, and I thought it would be kind of fun to share a kind of spooky event that happened to me a few years ago around Halloween. I had just moved to my current flat in Rains Park, southwest London, and was still fairly unfamiliar with the area. Now, my current bosses and supervisors know that I am still fighting a losing battle with the underwhelming reliability of Southwest trains, and as a result, have less than a reliable timekeeping when it comes to arriving to work on time. A battle I had hoped to circumvent with the purchase of a bicycle. Sadly, though, all too often, the London weather and my inherent idleness jointly conspire to once again force me to take the train to and from work. While some people are more than aware that the trains keep me from arriving to work on time, not many of you are aware of the troubles I have returning home. That is to say, I have many a time found myself stuck at Clapham Junction with no train to take me back to Rains Park. In these circumstances, I have to take a bus to Wimbledon Common and walk the remaining 3 miles on foot. It's actually quite a pleasant walk. London doesn't have many hills, and if I walk along the Ridgeway, I can actually occasionally catch a nice view. Now true, it is of Croydon, but a nice view nonetheless. Now, to call Wimbledon Village a privileged area would be an understatement. The driveways are home to sports cars and luxury utility vehicles, so you can imagine I have very uneventful walks home. I rarely see anyone on the trip aside from the odd older couple, perhaps walking home after a late dinner party, or even a person walking their dog. The neighborhood is quiet, and it gets to bed early, and that night was just like the others. Initially, I had gotten off the bus at the War Memorial, walked through the village center, and turned onto the Ridgeway. My phone's batteries had died somewhere between Wandsworth and Southfields, so I had to do the walk without music, and this always made the walk seem longer. My usual practice was to walk along and look at the houses, try and guess what the people that lived in the houses would be like. Fast car, business types, SUV and toys still in the front yard, larger family, that kind of thing. I was playing my game and decided to have a cigarette, so I stopped. I was searching for my lighter and looking around when I noticed that I was not the only one on the street. Now this was unusual, but hardly alarming. What was strange, however, was that the person wasn't the sort I had grown used to seeing. It was a young lady. She appeared to be drunk, or tired perhaps. I lit my cigarette and paused for a second. Just a quick second to judge if she would be capable of making it home by herself. Or perhaps maybe she would need me to see if I could call someone for her. It was at this point I realized that she was crying. I started to walk over to her to make sure she was all right. She stopped walking immediately, frozen. I noticed she was in some sort of Halloween costume. A schoolgirl, in fact. And as I got closer, I began to realize that she was in fact around the age of 15 to 16. She was deathly white. Her makeup must have been professionally done, or she had spent an incredibly long time preparing it. I began to decide that perhaps her friends had made fun of her costume and she had run off from whatever party she had been at, drunk and upset. I started feeling a bit unnerved when I noticed that she was staring directly at me as I approached. I can assure you that in a city the size of London, we have an unspoken rule of avoiding eye contact with strangers at all costs. It was at this point I assumed she was under the influence of something other than alcohol, and I decided to be a bit more cautious. I stopped about 4 or 5 feet away and spoke to her. "Are you okay? You seem a little upset. Are you in any sort of trouble?" Nothing from her apart from that stare. "Have you had a little too much to drink? Maybe some smoke?" "Yeah, right. I know hallucinogens when I see them." Still nothing. "Do you need a taxi home? Do you remember where you live?" At this, the girl began to cry again, but this time she was absolutely wailing. I could feel her raw sense of despair. I actually flinched at the sound. It was positively unbearable. She was dancing on the border of hysterics, perhaps even putting one foot along that line to see what would happen. I was stunned. I wanted to both console her and run in equal measures. I wanted to comfort her and chastise at the same time. All I managed, though, was a meek, "Why are you crying?" She must have heard me somehow, because she began to draw herself back up from the edge of what can only be described as complete breakdown. She was still heaving and sobbing, but once again she brought her eyes up to mine and said very softly, "Because you are going to die." Now, I have been unfortunate enough to witness death firsthand on more than one occasion. Suffice it to say, these events had always left me with a lot to think about, and I, in fact, had come to terms with my own mortality quite early in life. It struck me that perhaps, like too many of us had, this young lady had someone quite close to her die recently. Perhaps she was going through the same dark realizations that follow being in the company of death. The same thoughts that can keep children up at night and the pews full at churches. I wanted to let her know that everything would be fine, and that death was simply a part of life. All I managed, however, was a slightly incredulous, "I know." At this, she seemed slightly taken aback, almost angry. She responded, "You are going to die, and he is going to kill you." Alarms went off in my head. I began to feel more than a little threatened. I decided right there and then that talking this girl down from whatever bad high she was on was no longer my responsibility. Had not the venerable Hunter S. Thompson himself warned us of the dangers of underestimating the ability of a drug to take control of the person? "Good luck," I said, and with that, turned and began to walk away. After about 5 steps, I quickly looked back to see her still standing there. She put her head down and began to audibly sob again. I quickened my pace and shortly had walked along a natural bend in the road, leaving her out of sight. I had been left agitated. I remember putting my headphones back in my ears and trying to listen to music from my phone, only to remember it was out of power still. I was still 2 miles away from home, but at the pace I was walking, I was confident I could cover the ground in less than 20 minutes. No less than 2 minutes later was when I first heard the shouting. It was a man's voice, and layered within it was an excruciating sense of malice and rage.
"I am coming for you."
I couldn't quite place where the voice had come from, but it seemed as though he was at some distance behind me, on the same road, possibly from where the girl had been. I immediately realized that I was to be the victim of some sort of Halloween prank. I didn't, however, slow down. I imagined that this was the point when I was supposed to get scared and begin to run, and I was determined to not play along. Again, the man yelled, yet this time it seemed to come from significantly closer.
I hate you.
Now the voice had seemed to have come from somewhere quite close behind me. That is to say, at that volume, I would have expected to have seen the man addressing me, but I was still very much alone on the street. I was also walking quite fast, so the person yelling at me must have run quite fast. Yet, I had not heard any other footsteps. There was obviously more than one prankster, and they had hidden along points on the street. I quickly decided to be rather a poor sport and cut off the main road down Thornton Road at the Swan Pub. I hate to admit that their practical joke had gotten the better of me, and I did not want to see what they had in store for me next. I had made it to the front of the second house on the street when that terrible voice shouted at me again.
You are going to die.
This time, the voice seemed to have come from the entrance of the street less than 80 feet away. Perhaps a last chance at scaring me before I disappeared into the darker side streets. Since these streets were darker, I decided that I would lose no pride in starting to jog down the hill. I knew it was all probably fun and games, but the ferocity of the shouting left me worried that I could in fact be dealing with a real maniac. True, it would have been interesting to be a part of the most elaborate mugging I have ever heard of, but that voice just left me with the impression of true hatred. I didn't want to meet that person, or people rather, that could mimic and channel such malignant feelings at will. I had made it at the curve where Thornton Road changes when all of a sudden,
I will kill you.
This time the voice, the same voice that yelled, seemed to be directly to my right. He must have been hidden behind the fence or some house, or perhaps even hidden within the house. I had obviously walked right into their trap. I broke into a sprint at this point, pride be damned. I began to run quite fast and then faster straight downhill. At this point, I was actually beginning to panic. My mind was playing terrible tricks on me, it seemed, as though the voice was all around me, constantly yelling, constantly screaming. Up ahead was the main road, Whirlpool Road to be precise. Busy. I could hail a cab and be home in minutes. But the voices, the immensity.
I hate you, you coward. Die, die, die.
Every second, all around me, the adrenaline must have been heightening my every sense. I admit I was scared, and it all seemed as though for some reason that terrible voice was booming off every surface on the street. It felt as though I was simultaneously running away and into that mad rage. The words felt like gusts of a terrible hot wind, pushing its venomous anger at me. I couldn't take it anymore. The voice seemed to make me share that same intense anger. I thought to myself, am I the one shouting? And I felt like a victim. I wanted to kill the people that were playing this mad trick on me. I felt the hatred.
Time to die, coward. I hate you.
I decided I had to give up. In one quick moment, I decided I would stop running as fast as I could and have a cigarette and wait for these people to show themselves. Come what may, I needed answers and a smoke. I quickly stopped my run and spun around. A car beeped as it raced past exactly where I would have run to had I not stopped that exact moment. I felt its air pocket ruffle the back of my hair as it sped past. In my blind panic, I had run past the sidewalk of the main road and onto the actual road. I had avoided running blindly into the road and being run down by inches. I looked up the road I had come from. Darkness, silence. Whoever had been up there was now gone. I lit my cigarette and took a few moments to calm down. Smoking had saved my life that day, friends. I went home after that. Nothing more happened to me. But as I was standing there, trying to calm down, working through the panic and adrenaline, I seemed to remember feeling like I heard a soft whisper, perhaps just my imagination. I thought I heard a girl's voice softly saying, "Not such a coward after all." I'm posting my story here, as I don't know anywhere else to put it. I don't know if I even believe it myself. I'm hoping someone else has seen this before, as I don't trust my own mind. I came from humble beginnings, Lower middle class childhood with parents who barely had enough self-awareness to recognize themselves, and far too little to understand children were entire little humans with their own lives and needs. I spent years running from my childhood. The further I got away from my parents, the more money I made, the less I felt like that kid locked in the basement listening to endless screaming. But that's not what this story is about. Not really. This story is about a great time in my life. I met her at 34. We had both recently broken off with long-term partners and weren't looking for anything serious. Her name was Isabel. Well, her name still is Isabel. We met on online dating, and it was fireworks from the start. We did all the normal texting that culminated to a date. A date culminated to coming upstairs to meet her dog, which culminated to us falling in love, moving in together, and getting engaged. Life was fantastic. Better than fantastic. Resplendent. Yes, I went to college and paid too much for an English degree. Shout out to my fellow debt-laden graduate friends. We had both broken from our humble beginnings and earned well into the 6 figures. We traveled the world, made love in every major continent, and made a home with ourselves and our 2 four-legged children. I won't bore you with all the details, as they're not relevant to my issue, and frankly, those memories are gone and replaced with a black void. We got engaged and then married. That's where everything went wrong. Very, very wrong. I had wanted a unique wedding ring, something unique and something that had seen many lives before my own. I searched online for months, perusing various antique jewelry sites and sending options to my future wife. Nothing was standing out to us, until one day I received an email with an invite-only link to an antique ring site. I had assumed that all my searching had laid little cookie trails across the web, and I had been auto-targeted by a clever campaign to sell antique designer rings. I should have known something was strange right away. The email link led me to a professional-looking site, but they only had one ring for sale. A men's ring, in my size, with the exact features I was looking for. The ring was black with gold adornments. The inside of the ring had script in a language I did not recognize. Something I assumed once meant something, but which had faded with age. The ring was simple yet elegant, something truly unique while seeming so simple and unassuming. It fit my personality and style perfectly. My wife agreed, and I made the purchase. The ring took a few weeks to arrive. The packaging was plain and unassuming. A simple, thick brown packaging envelope with the ring inside, encased in a small metal box. I remember opening the box and feeling like some unknown force was holding it closed. It took some effort for my adult hands to pry the casing open. When it finally came ajar, the ring immediately caught my attention and held my gaze. The black of the ring was darker than the darkest of nights, and the gold shimmered like the eyes of a beast, staring out from that dark night. My wife had to snap her fingers to get me back to reality. I'm rambling too much, I know. I'm looking at the ring on my finger now, and I feel like I could ramble forever before getting to the point. Almost as if the ring doesn't want me to get to the point. But I have to keep going, as I don't know if there will ever be a time to write this again. Bear with me if I'm a bit scrambled. My mind feels unfocused, but I will do my best. We got married. It was a beautiful night. My wife wore a beautiful dress that she had worked with a local designer to bring to life. The bottom was like the end of a rainbow that nature had taken and laid upon fabric. The waist was a plain and vibrant white, and the straps hugged her shoulders in such a way to hint to onlookers that this dress was made for her and only for her. The beauty of her face, hair, and features accented this miracle of art and design. I remember saying our vows and her placing the ring on my finger. That was 2 years ago now, and likely the last time I was happy. I firmly believe happiness ended at that point, and joy is something I will never feel again. Everything in our life started to go badly. My wife's successful business started to have issues. Employees were leaving, customers were leaving, We were sinking more and more money into it, and nothing went our way. It went from a success to a complete disaster within 6 months of our wedding. I had never been much of a drinker, but found myself drinking more and more often. My mind used to be clear and clever, but suddenly I craved the warm numbness of drink after drink. I started to feel disconnected from other people. My wife and I stopped having sex. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped taking care of myself. My days were spent on the couch on my laptop, ensuring that my job and income remained stable as my wife's business crumbled before our eyes. We started arguing. We went from holding hands and making love to arguing about the most simple and mundane aspects of our lives. I screamed and yelled at her, something I had never done with her, or anyone, in my entire life. I had always been so gentle and caring. I was becoming something I no longer understood. My wife said I wasn't the man that she married. Then she left. My marriage was over. My life felt like it was over. She divorced me and met another man. I sat in my house on the couch and drank my days away, barely able to hold on to my remote job working in technology. If you've read this far into this mess, I'm asking you to read just a bit more. I finally decided it was time to take off my wedding ring. This is where my plea for help comes, the whole point of my story. The ring didn't want to come off. I tried pulling it off, soaking my hand, using soap, cooling my hand, heating my hand, using pliers, using my teeth. I spent hour after hour. The ring finally came off. Once the ring came off, I had clarity enter my mind. A dense fog had surrounded my mind for so long, it felt like a shock of electricity. My mind raced with everything that happened the past year. Everything that happened to my wife's business, all the cruel things I said to her, all the mistakes I had made, and all the drinking and drugs. Reader, listener, I don't know how to explain it, but it wasn't me doing and saying those things to my wife. I know there is no way she will believe me, but the ring had taken over my thoughts and actions. It felt like a dark hand had encased my mind and heart, and all the actions I took and words I said were of a mind and not my own. I am also very scared right now. The ring is back on my finger and I don't know how it got there. I feel my mind slipping. I don't even know why I've been writing this story for idiots like you. You're just as stupid as my shit of an ex-wife, and dying would be too merciful for trash like you. I'm losing control. I have to post this before it's too late. Help. Help, you idiots. Edit. In the light of morning, I can't see what all the fuss was about last night. The ring didn't do anything. I just became more of what I really was. I never was a kind and generous man. It's foolish to think some magic ring changed me. There is no such thing as magic. This post makes me chuckle to myself now. I really like my ring, and the more I think about it, the more I'm curious about making my own rings and selling them online. I'm in a lot of debt after my divorce, and I could really use the extra money. I received an email just this morning from the supplier of the ring. They're going to send me some metal and even pay for me to take a class on metalworking. It's been a long time since I've had good luck, and it seems like things are changing for the better. For once. I'd love to make any of you happy. Aren't you sad sometimes? I want to help you. You don't even have to get married. I would love to make you a ring if you just PM me your address. You deserve to feel good and have something nice. I promise my work will be really nice. I won't even charge you, and it will ship for free. My only price is a picture of your new ring on your finger, so I can get a website online with some models. You don't even have to wear it if you find you don't like it. Just put the ring on once and send me a picture. It'll only take a moment. You deserve to be happy. Let me help you be happy.